sounds about right. From Pakistan to Texas, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, from one species to another, from trees to infants, to kids with asthma, to women with breast cancer. The wounds are all around us, and it hurts to look at it. I know it hurts. I believe all of you know what that pain feels like. The anger, the fear, the grief. We have to carry these things. We have to support each other and ourselves in carrying them. We have to make sure that we're aware of the feelings that are part of this work. Otherwise, we will suffer from a disorder of feelings, as Kierkegaard said, the disorder consisting in not having any. Another reason not to be an environmentalist is, like Bill says, you're going to bum everybody out. You're going to go to the barbecue and think of the effects of all the fossil fuels used in growing meat and the disastrous waste products from food farms, from the industrial food system. You go to the supermarket and see person after person carrying endless quantities of cardboard and tin and aluminum packaging and wonder, where is all this stuff going and how much energy was used to produce it? You see a beautiful little toy like an iPad and realize how many pounds and pounds of water and toxic chemicals were used in order to produce it. You're no fun anymore. And people will get angry at you. They will call you a communist, a tree hugger, an eco-terrorist, a lunatic, somebody who's just transferring feelings about their parents into this work against Exxon. It's tough. And finally, it's tough because we're all part of the problem. Charge the oil companies more to dispose of their waste, and we will pay more for our cars, our public transportations, our food. Are we ready to make a sacrifice? Are we ready to articulate to this country, to the world, that in certain ways we don't need more jobs, more growth, more of an economy, more of a gross national product? That it's time perhaps to stop growing so much and time to spend our effort more in accepting what we have and learning to share it more equitably. Fair and balanced, while you should be an environmentalist, despite everything. One thing is, you meet the nicest people. The articulating vision of global environmentalism is not for any particular group. It is for all of humanity and for all of life. That makes your average, typical, run-of-the-mill environmentalist sweeter, nicer, and better humored than most. It's a great bunch of people to hang out with. It's great to be an environmentalist because sometimes, not very often, but sometimes we win. There are 300. Possible is that we say, whatever the future holds, I will live with love today. Thank you.
Thank you. Cooperative is a beautiful word. What that also means is that in a cooperative effort, there's more than one person involved. Therefore, in this case, there are many people involved, and if I took the time to name even the people I know, I'll use up my time. So instead of that, I want to say thank you very much for all of you who are involved in this, and I hope that we continue our journey together. And Bill, it's a traveling partner, as you said. It's wonderful to continue the journey together, and it's a special pleasure and honor. Okay, I think that you just look around, and in fact it gets more and more difficult every day to really not ask ourselves what is going on. Really, when we had the pleasant days in March, I was calling it alarmingly pleasant. And so, but it was pleasant, but it was alarmingly pleasant. So I asked myself that, my gosh, what have we done really? So I start thinking that how could be so stupid, so ignorant, so harmful if we intend or unintended. Then I start thinking about history. Then what I do is that I want to share two-line this here. Okay. This says, whatever I dig up of you, O earth, if we work together, we have the spiritual foundation for it, we have the technological foundation for it, and the politics will change. And that's where we need to really work together, and let's do it together. That's why I'm here, and thank you very much.
Questions and answers. We do want people to begin clustering and conspiring to connect the dots on May 5th, and we do want people to have time to visit the organizational partners tables and all the good work, and leave us your email to be in touch about future actions. But Latifa, would you like to moderate sister right here in the green? Yeah, Bill, if you could come back to reply to questions, respond to questions. Can I give you a hug, buddy?
Okay. Can you stand up and say your question?
The issue, it seems to me, for every environmental problem, which is a really hard thing to talk about, is that there are too many of our species on the planet. And given that, the question I have, particularly for our spiritual leaders, is there a moral imperative, especially for those of us in the West that have an unusually large carbon footprint, to limit the size of our families?
Wow, that's a Union of Concerned Scientists question, I think.
Let Bill speak to that. We can book about it.
Well, thanks, Dan. That's, I did write a book called Maybe One about the topic of whether or not people in our part of the world might want to think about smaller families. Population is very important, especially as a multiplier of consumption, but it also needs to be said, and this is a kind of hopeful thing, that population's the one part of this puzzle we've actually done a good deal about in the last 30 years. People figured out what it was that drove populations down. If you educate women and empower them, then the number of children that they have drops sharply. The average woman 30 years ago on this planet had 6 children. Now that number is 2.4 and continuing to fall pretty rapidly. So that's amazing progress in a short period. There's enough demographic momentum, enough people coming into their childbearing years around the world, that the population will continue to go up for about another 30, 35 years and top out in the middle of the century, and then begin, we think, a sort of long, slow decline, assuming that various catastrophe and tragedy doesn't intervene. It is worth reminding ourselves, though, that at this point, that's not the biggest driver of the increase in emissions, because you have to always remember how big the gulf between rich and poor in this world really is. I mean, I'm the biggest fan of and participant in the Occupy movement that there is, but it does remind us every once in a while that on a global sense, we're all the 1%, The average American family uses more energy between the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve and dinner on January 2nd than the average Tanzanian family uses in the course of a year, okay? So in terms of global warming, the number of Tanzanians is not a significant number, okay? But so you went to just the right place with your question and thought a little bit about whether or not people in, and I will just tell you the conclusion of that book, Maybe One, which was set out, since I had one child, to find out whether all these myths were true about only children being, odd and spoiled and whatever else. The biggest reason
actually, that people give for having a second child is so their first child won't be an only child, okay? And there are many good reasons to want to have a lot of kids because they're wonderful and fun, but that turns out not to be one of them. Only children do just fine. So if your children or grandchildren have one child, do not be talking to them all the time about when the next one is going to come. Let them decide on their own, okay?
Thank you, Bill. Does anyone else have an answer for that as well? Tess, you had something you wanted to say?
Sometimes too, what we need to look at also when you speak about population, that in many parts of this country, I know when I work with the farm workers, that was one of the things right in this country, but in many parts of the world, having
the atmosphere, and it wouldn't shut down the whole electric grid or anything else. I mean, it is sort of worth thinking about that when, you know, we have a solar spill, we call it a sunny day, you know, and that's a kind of good start.
We have 2 more hands. My husband, actually.
I just remember reading, I was driving and I read, it was pasted on the window, and so remember that professionals built the Titanic and amateurs built the Ark. So my point is, being faith-based, I think we have it licked because we can come together and pray in the rain.
Amen.
That's faith.
Amen.
And the woman in the black shirt, or green shirt, sorry, looks black.
It's a mixture of colors. My name is Dorian. I'm a Brandon student, and I was one of the 1,253 people. Others of us here as well, I know. And my question that I refrained from asking while you're eating your meal was why we haven't, I mean, we saw the power that the Keystone movement was and that coming together, and that there are a lot of people waiting for that ask and waiting for that letter calling them to action, and who see the severity of what's in front of us and want to do as much as we can, and why we're just sort of curious as to your thinking. You know, it was a temporary victory. I mean, a very substantial, powerful one, but I mean, what's going on with the southern portion, the other pipelines that are in process, why we haven't stepped up to those in the same way.
So that's a perfect question. One of the answers, truthfully, is it's incredibly hard work to even do one of these things, you know, to sort of the amount of organizing and energy and whatever it takes is enormous, and you got to make sure that it's for something that you have a chance of winning, and that the win will. Right now we're in election season in this country, okay, so it's hard to get people, the next few months, all the oxygen kind of gets sucked out of the room by the presidential subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, and if nothing else, you should make him aware of that. A good way to do it, one of the things we're going to make sure happens as many places as we can, and you can go right to work on this, you know, if you're going to take money.
So we're forming a 350 Mass Students group. There's a website, 350mass.org, so you all check that, see how we can better coordinate your efforts locally. There are a number of local events happening here in Boston. In Jamaica Plain, there's a festival, I forget the exact.
Wake Up the Earth. Wake Up the Earth.
Wake the Earth Festival. It's an annual event, and they're having the Connected Dots action in coordination with that event. A number of other folks are planning a climate twister game on Boston Common at noon, and we'll probably migrate that to the festival. So spinning a wheel and right hand on blue means we'll give a fact about floods, and left hand on green on dirty money in politics, and so on. Just a way to hopefully engage folks in the common before, again, moving over to the festival. And I know we're actually looking for some volunteers for the Metro Boston